Community Designs is proudly brought to you by Design Build Expo, Australia's ultimate trade event for architecture, building, construction and design professional communities. Visit designbuildexpo.com.au for more information.
Hi, my name's Monique Woodward and this is another episode of Community Designs. Today we're standing at Dentacorca Marshall's Melbourne Museum and we're going to take a look at Pauline Gandal's Children's Gallery. Let's go inside. I'm standing here with Gavin Lowe from UDL Group, the landscape contractors who brought this space to life. Gavin, tell us about some of the challenges in designing the space.
Look, the biggest challenge we faced was all the unknown services and pipes that when we started digging, this place was full of them.
Yeah. And how did you sort of overcome those challenges?
So with good communication with the landscape architect and also the museum, you know, we didn't want to compromise the design at all, but you know, moving a rock here and lifting a log there, making sure it all fitted in. Yeah.
And so you had a core team working with you?
Yeah, I had a very talented team that worked with me, and that's very important. Yeah.
And so do you do this kind of work with, you know, children's spaces a lot?
We've done quite a lot of childcare centres.
Yeah.
This is the biggest and the most high profile job we've done, but it's really good to see the end result of it. Yeah, I can imagine it's a space that you'd be extremely proud of. Oh, for sure. Even on the opening on Sunday, just seeing all the kids, you know, looking for bones in the sand pits, playing with the water feature, the spinning frog, it was really good to see. Yeah.
So which bit's your favourite?
That's a good question. I mean, it was very stressful, but I'd say, you know, the bones really stand out to me as well. Yeah. And also a lot of the feature rocks we've got.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time.
No worries.
I'm in the garden with Karen McConville from Xylem Landscape Architects. Tell us about this space.
Well, there's a lot to tell. The project has been going on for at least 2 years, and you'll be talking to Alex from the museum, and it could have been longer. I've been involved for about 1.5 years, and so it's probably about 2.5 years that the whole project's been going on. So the museum, in-house staff and research team worked on consultation for at least 1 year, and again you'll have to talk to Alex about that and get more detail because they did a huge amount of background work before I showed up. And that really gave me a wonderful brief to work on when I arrived. So a lot of jobs that I work on a lot of natural play spaces. Yeah. And usually people bring me in because I have experience and they say, okay, what should we do? Yeah. This was quite different. The design team is very talented and very organized, and they had a specific brief that relates to this space and the user groups of Melbourne. Yeah. And the concept was pretty clear, although there was a lot of flexibility in it, so there was a lot of creative work to be done still, and I worked with the design team in a collaborative team, which was wonderful. Yeah. The courtyard is pretty challenging because it's an architectural space with a lot of tilted walls and dominant architecture and very defined, very hard. But we developed it into a series of zones, so there's active spaces and passive spaces and spaces that the museum calls pull-out spaces that are more of like a chill-out kind of place.
Yeah, cool.
So there's lots of diversity in the spaces that were laid out originally. And the other challenge is, of course, in a space like this is that the existing services to keep the museum running are really extensive. So during the design and during the construction, anytime we dug a hole, there was a giant pipe and unknown utility. underneath the ground. So I got a lot of phone calls saying, Carol, we have to move the shade structure again, that sort of thing. And because the courtyard is quite contained and constrained in its design, and we wanted to just pack in as much as possible into the design and achieve, a big variety of spaces and detail.
Talk to us about the sort of design concept of the courtyard.
Well, the museum and myself were really keen to integrate as much natural play space elements as possible. And that was because of the consultation that they did. That's what kids want, that's what kids need these days. Kids spend too much time indoors playing with electronics, et cetera, et cetera. So the museum really wanted to foster the philosophies of natural play spaces. So the space we're standing in right now is known as the little bush garden, bush discovery garden. There's a lot of details in here, little animal sculptures that the kids can discover, lots of rocks, lots of texture. The idea of sensory gardens was incorporated throughout with textures and plants that smell nice. There's a frangipani right behind you, and some mint bushes and things like that. So the variety of spaces was really important to us. Over in the other part of the courtyard is a large running space that is quite free and open and has really thick rubberized surface, which isn't natural, but it's actually over an underground building. So so we didn't have many options there, but what it serves as is a really great open space for kids to run around in. The museum has supplied these great building blocks, which is part of this loose parts play, which is really important for kids. And there's an outdoor cafe to eat in. So that part of the courtyard is very, very different from, for example, this bush discovery area. And over there's the dinosaur digging area, which is a lot of fun for kids. Big sand pits with giant dinosaur bones that the museum has manufactured themselves. A lot of detail. Because it's a museum, they have the staff that can actually create really fine artworks, like dinosaur bones and real-life looking animal sculptures and that sort of thing.
I noticed the bronze sculptures around the sort of peppered around the park.
And they're meant to be, discovery things and very tactile. There's a crystal cave around the corner with giant quartz crystals. There's a rock garden that has rocks from all over the world with many, many different patterns and textures. Really, really special, unique things that, because it's a museum, they're able to do that sort of thing. You wouldn't be able to do that in a public park or an early learning center. So it's become a real special job because of that. The whole team was really cognizant of this being a real legacy project because of, it's a major Melbourne institution. It will probably, one hopes, will be here for the next 25, 30 years. It will only get better because the trees are going to grow and flourish. So there was a lot of heart and a lot of passion, and a lot of hard work as well.
I can imagine.
But really a great collaborative team effort on everyone's part. There's a lot of artists involved in the project too. These woven seats here, just to name some names, Pat Jarrett. This was done by someone named Ben Friend, and there's a giant woven nest in the other part of the garden that we might take a look at, and some frog sculptures. There's an indigenous story that runs through the courtyard with Tiddalik the frog. So the frog sculptures were made by Martin Moore. So having those sort of resources to integrate into the garden was really lovely as well. So there's a lot of different layers of things happening here. The original brief called for this idea of patterns to be incorporated into the garden, so the paving is quite complex with a lot of circular patterns. which sort of developed with the Tiddalik story as well, because he's a frog that drank all the water and then spit it out again and saved the world, which is a story about saving water and not being selfish, etc. So those circular patterns are running throughout the garden. And one of the frog sculptures does a spit, which the kids the other day were just loving so much.
Yeah. Talk to us about this sculpture. This blue is meant to be referencing bowerbird, I believe.
Yeah, it is making a reference to a bowerbird nest. It's basically started out as a tunnel, and we gave it a bit more detail to make it more interesting and more sculptural.
Yeah. Should we take a walk down the garden path?
Yes, let's do that.
We're on the dinosaur trail with these footprints. Tell us about the dinosaur and this space.
Okay, well, as we spoke about earlier, there's a lot of different types of spaces in the garden. The dinosaur trail, as you call it, which is the lovely name, are a series of really giant dinosaur footprints made of black granite. And it leads children to what we call the ancient garden, and the ancientness is sort of expressed a lot through planting, I have to say. There's things like brachychitons and ginkgos. Ginkgos are a very, very ancient tree. Leucadendrons are a dominant plant in here, and they are from South Africa and Gondwanaland. You know, so there's all sorts of layers of thinking that the kids aren't really going to notice, but the ginkgos will be absolutely stunning as they mature. This row of ginkgos behind me will just be a wall of bright yellow and in the autumn, and the leucadendrons have all sorts of colors and textures in them as well. The museum has incorporated pretty much an entire manufactured skeleton of one of their famous dinosaurs that are on display. So there is that connection to the in and out that they really wanted to reinforce. But of course, kids have to find those dinosaurs by excavating and being scientists, being little scientists. So they'll get brushes and little diggers to unearth the dinosaur bones within the two very large sand pits. We also have a couple of smaller sand pits that have some smaller, interesting fossils and dinosaur eggs. And those are designed as well for people of different abilities. So there's a lot of conscious effort to work in all the entire space, to work in spaces for people of different abilities, wheelchairs and people who might be brought out of a wheelchair in a comfortable manner and that sort of thing. So that was always on top of our mind as well. Behind the ancient garden is a giant bird's nest, and that's in a bamboo forest, which is quite young right now, but that'll grow up to be about 4 meters tall or so, so it would be a really dense, really fun space. That was done by an artist named Greg Hatton, and Greg also did these log platforms, which are behind us. They are serving as a real central gathering space for groups to come in for outdoor learning. So that will serve really well because it's really quite self-contained, so that there's the good thing about the courtyard, because of all the different spaces, you could bring 2 or 3 groups in here and still have the general public roaming around quite easily. So it gives them that flexibility, which any institution wants, really.
Talk about how you grappled with the architecture.
Well, as I said before, the architecture defines the perimeter of the space, and there's no getting out of that. The primary colors are quite dominant. Well, I suppose, you know, things like the bush discovery garden contrast nicely with that. So I think that's pretty much the way we approached it, is that we're not so much going to bring more of that primary color in the angles and such. We're really trying to soften it and make it a nice kid space. So it's more of really, you know, a ground plane softness where the architecture sort of rises up from that. The biggest challenge with services, as I mentioned before, We've got a beautiful frog sculpture over there. Yeah. The infrastructure for that spitting frog is quite extensive, surprisingly. Yeah. And the frog on the site plan moved around so much because we had to find a place for the big reservoir pit to be underneath it, and to find a space that was clear of services was pretty challenging.
And what's your favourite space?
It's really hard to say because they're all so different. I guess I'd have to say the bush garden. Yeah. One thing I didn't mention before is in the bush garden we have little live cubbies that are made from grafted apple trees, and they, like all the plants in here, are really going to fill in and create really solid blocks of greenery. So I'm really looking forward for the next couple of years to watch that mature. But those cubbies are a bit of an experiment. We're not sure how the kids will handle them and if they'll do okay. But they did really well the other day. Kids were quite respectful of them and sat inside, and and they actually grow apples, you know.
Oh wow! Okay. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Joining me is Alex Price, Programs Officer at Melbourne Museum. Alex, tell us about the big box and what's going on here.
So the Pauline Gandel Children's Gallery was developed for babies to 5-year-olds. We've always had, since Melbourne Museum's been opened, a children's space, and previously it was for 3 to 8-year-olds, but we realised that a lot of younger children were coming and spending a lot of time in here, and there's also been a lot of really good neuroscience research evidence pointing to the fact that children really do learn from birth. So we really wanted to create a space for children under that 3-year-old age group. And so we were very fortunate that we got some funding from the state government and also the Gandel Philanthropy organisation to redevelop our children's gallery. So we've got a big multimedia, big immersive experience happening here for children and carers, for them to learn together and play together. So the emphasis being on play, learning through play. We developed the space, and when we originally approached the project, we were mindful that we were able to create a redeveloped space in the inside and also in the outside in the garden. It was a bit of a daunting task, so we had to try and come up with a way of really introducing experiences that are going to be suitable for the age group, but also making them museum-y, if that's a word. So what we decided to do was we just created this idea of a shaping tool which would help us inform the experiences that would go in the inside and the outside space. And the shaping tool is patterns, which works really nicely across our collections. So we went into our collections and we tried to find really patterned objects, and thought about some of the stories that we could use that incorporated patterns, in audio and in visual and other sorts of ways. And that actually worked really well. So we're actually standing in front of a spotty and stripy showcase. We went through the collection and found a whole lot of spotty animals, all different sorts. You can see there are giraffes, birds, all different sorts of things. Put them together to create these beautiful museum showcases. We also used the idea of patterns to create sort of intimate experiences as well. So for example, we've got a lullaby nook where children can crawl inside and they can sit there and listen to lullabies from different cultures from around the world. And obviously the idea of lullabies picks up on the patterns in music as well.
Tell us about the space behind us. It's pretty psychedelic.
We have a fairly psychedelic space, the Camouflage Disco, which has normally a soundscape. So we worked with 3 different artists to create soundscapes using patterns in sound, but also incorporating some animal calls and some other patterns, other sound patterns, and then matched it up to a lighting projection display. So again, pulling out animals and sounds and visuals from nature as well, and some of our very talented animators mapped that to the sounds. So children can come in and dance away, or as we found in our testing period, we did a lot of testing with children. Sometimes they just like to roll around on the floor and just try and chase things and do all sorts of things. So yeah.
Yeah, because you did a lot of testing with the materiality and the narratives as well.
We did, yeah. So we started the project by working with lots of children. We had a really good relationship with the Gowrie Docklands Childcare Centre, and they actually brought their children up, including their babies, up to Melbourne Museum, where we conducted a workshop looking at, we asked them to create their own dream museum. So they did that using a lot of loose parts, using some toy animals and lots of craft materials and things. And through that we learnt quite early on that the younger children really loved the tactile experiences. They loved anything they could touch and feel and put into their mouth. That sort of thing. But the older children were also really interesting too. They were very attracted to nature-based activities, so they created dream museums which had an emphasis on nature. So children described in their museum they could walk around through the forest, around past rocks, and then there would be a monster hiding behind the rocks. And we said to them, "Is that monster scary?" And they said, "It's scary, but it's not scary for me." So that idea of being safe and being scared in a safe way really came through. And I think that translated into a lot of different ideas throughout the inside and the outside of the gallery. We tried to have a lot of little surprise moments where there is a tiger hiding in the camouflage disco. It'll come on, it'll be lit up at certain times, but it is behind glass, so children can know it's safe. And outside there's a lot of little surprises hidden around, so little beautiful bronze sculptures that are hidden in the rocks and things that children can discover.
And so talk about the play equipment and how it relates to sort of different age groups and then ability levels.
Sure. So as I said, we did a lot of testing. We actually involved almost 500 children in our testing over the 2.5 years of the project. We got them to come in and basically we created ideas, I suppose you could say draft experiences, and we just stood back and observed and watched how they interacted. So we also worked with a fantastic group of health and additional needs professionals, people from Vision Australia, Tara Lee, Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Department of Education, lots and lots of amazing people who worked with children with additional needs, and they advised us quite early on to do things like create really high energy zones and really low energy zones, so that children who might find things a little bit too stimulating can actually go and pull back and sit down and for example go into the lullaby nook or go into a quieter experience, and then they might be ready to go and jump and run around. So some of the high energy experiences we've got are things like the camouflage disco, but we also have a really big net climbing structure. One of the challenges with working with this big box gallery inside here was that the height is very, very high, and we wanted some way to be able for the children to be able to go up and experience that height. So we've created, our design team created this amazing net climbing structure, which allows children of all ages to participate really, because the younger ones can crawl up in the first level. It's not too challenging. They can go up to one level at the first pod, and then the older ones can be a little bit more challenged, and they can climb up through a red net tunnel and go up into a sort of more challenging climbing area. So that was a way that's another high energy space. And then again we've got even simple things like a storybook corner where parents and children can do something that's familiar. They can come and they can take some time out and read.
Talk to us a little bit about the train and the entry.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we found when working with our early consultation groups, we found that a lot of the, and doing a bit of our research into our audience ourselves, is that a lot of our families weren't actually, of the target age, weren't actually making it down to the children's gallery. They were actually turning right at the dinosaurs, as we say. So what we decided to do was create a really iconic moment where people could say to each other, we'll meet you at that, and it turned out to be a train. So in our collection we found a beautiful third scale replica steam locomotive engine, and we found it was in beautiful condition, and we thought that's a really iconic object that we could put in the beginning of the gallery. Children love trains, and it creates just a really nice attractor to bring people down. We've also created a child-friendly, child-encouraging tunnel, I suppose you could say, which has a lower entrance. So really we're trying to say, children, you can come through the tunnel, and by making the children or adults that sort of stoop down to get to the child level, it sends a bit of a message that this gallery is for children, and we're hoping that the agency is handed over to the children. Through that tunnel they get a really nice immersive experience with lots of sound and lighting and actual sounds from the train that would have been original.
And parents can come through the cafe.
And they can come through the cafe and grab a coffee, yeah. And that's one of the beautiful things about our outside garden design. We've got the cafe experience sitting outside, so we're really encouraging parents and families to come and take their food or bring their own food if they like and come and spend time outside in the garden, and the children can just explore while the parents have a nice moment chilling out and relaxing and having a bit of time out from parenting duties. Or if they'd like to, definitely they're welcome to go and play with their children in the sandpit or through the cubbies and things,
And there's a sort of middle area that's sort of, extremely tactile.
Yes, inside the gallery. Yes. So there is what we're calling, I guess it's an unofficial title, a baby crawl space. So very, very tactile. So we've used that for the younger audiences to be able to go and explore lots and lots of tactile things, from tactile discs on the walls to a beautiful sculpture which has been made out of rope that was created by an amazing artist, and then there's lots of little crawl spaces where children can crawl through shapes and look at mirrors and things.
Awesome, thank you so much, Alex.
My pleasure, thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Community Designs. See you next week.